Kyle Asis leaned against the polished bar of the Celestial Pearl space station, his eyes sweeping over the opulent casino floor. The hum of alien languages and the chime of gambling machines created a symphony of interstellar vice. He sipped his drink, a glowing blue concoction, and suppressed a grimace. The things he endured for a mission. A Zygonian female sidled up to him, her iridescent scales shimmering under the casino's gaudy lights. "Care for some company, handsome?" she purred, her forked tongue flickering between razor-sharp teeth. Kyle flashed a disarming smile. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm here strictly for the poker tournament." The Zygonian's eyes narrowed. "Your loss," she hissed, slithering away. Kyle exhaled slowly, his fingers tracing the outline of the concealed energy pistol beneath his jacket. The slavers were here somewhere, and he'd be damned if they slipped away again. A commotion near the VIP area caught his attention. Two burly Kriax guards were escorting a striking humanoid female. Her cerulean skin and silver hair marked her as Zen Hari royalty, but the fear in her eyes betrayed her predicament. This had to be the missing Princess Victoria. Kyle pushed off from the bar, weaving through the crowd. He tailed the group to a restricted area, pausing as the door slid shut behind them. With a flick of his wrist, a small device materialized in his palm. He pressed it against the control panel, and the lock disengaged with a soft click. The corridor beyond was dimly lit and eerily quiet. Kyle crept forward, his senses on high alert. Muffled voices drifted from a room at the end of the hall. He pressed his ear to the door, listening intently. "The bidding starts at 1 million credits, a gravelly voice announced. "We have a genuine Zanari princess on the block tonight, gentlemen. Who will open?" Kyle's jaw clenched. He'd found the auction, but he was outnumbered and outgunned. Time for a more subtle approach. He focused inward, calling upon the power that coursed through his veins. The air around him shimmered, and suddenly he was invisible to the naked eye. Kyle phased through the door, emerging into a crowded room filled with the galaxy's worst criminals. Victoria stood on a raised platform, her wrists bound by energy cuffs. Her regal bearing remained intact, but Kyle could see the fear and disgust in her eyes as leering bidders shouted increasingly obscene offers. He needed a distraction. Kyle scanned the room, his gaze settling on the environmental controls. With a thought, he sent a surge of energy into the system. Alarms blared as the temperature plummeted, frost forming on every surface. Chaos erupted, aliens of all species scrambling for the exits, shoving and clawing in their panic. Kyle materialized beside Victoria, his hands working quickly to deactivate her restraints. "What?" she began, her eyes wide with shock. "No time to explain," Kyle interrupted, grabbing her arm. "We need to move now." They sprinted through the pandemonium, dodging panicked criminals and confused guards. Kyle's mind raced, plotting their escape route. They just needed to reach his ship. A massive Kriax blocked their path, energy rifle raised. "Stop right there!" he bellowed. Kyle reacted instinctively. He thrust out his hand, and a wave of invisible force slammed into the guard, sending him flying across the room. Victoria gasped, her gaze darting between Kyle and the prone Kriax. "How did you—" "Later," Kyle said tersely, pulling her along. They burst out onto the main concourse, alarms still blaring throughout the station. Kyle spotted a maintenance access hatch and wrenched it open, ushering Victoria inside. As they crawled through the cramped service tunnels, Kyle's mind drifted to a long-buried memory. 4-year-old Kyle stood atop a snow-covered mountain, his small body shaking violently in the biting wind. His grandfather loomed over him, eyes hard as steel. "Warm yourself, Kyle," the old man commanded. "Use the flame within you, or freeze." Tears streamed down Kyle's face, instantly freezing on his cheeks. He closed his eyes, desperately reaching for something, anything. A tiny spark ignited in his palm, flickering weakly against the howling storm. Kyle shook off the memory as they emerged near the docking bays. His ship, the Starfire, waited just ahead. They sprinted across the hangar, boots clanging on the metal floor. "Stop them!" a voice roared behind them. Energy bolts sizzled past, leaving scorch marks on the walls. Kyle slapped the entry panel, and the Starfire's hatch hissed open. He shoved Victoria inside, diving in after her as return fire peppered their pursuers. Initiating launch sequence, the ship's AI announced calmly. Kyle threw himself into the pilot's seat, fingers flying over the controls. The engines roared to life, and the Starfire shot out of the hangar bay like a bullet from a gun. "We've got company," Victoria said, her voice tight as she stared at the sensor readouts. 3 ships in pursuit. Kyle gritted his teeth, pushing the Starfire to its limits. The space around them warped as they entered hyperspace, leaving their pursuers far behind. Only then did Kyle allow himself to relax slightly, turning to face his unexpected passenger. Victoria met his gaze, her expression a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "I believe you owe me an explanation," she said, her tone imperious despite her bedraggled appearance. Kyle sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's a long story, Your Highness, but I suppose we've got time." As Kyle began to recount the events that led them to this point, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger adventure. The memory of his childhood training lingered in the back of his mind, a reminder of the destiny he tried so hard to escape. But for now, they were safe, and that would have to be enough. The Starfire drifted through the swirling nebula, its hull gleaming in the ethereal light of newborn stars. Kyle stood at the viewport, his eyes fixed on the cosmic spectacle before him. Behind him, Victoria paced the bridge, her patience wearing thin. "You still haven't explained who you really are," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. "Or why you risked your life to save me." Kyle turned, his expression unreadable. "Would you believe me if I told you I'm just a good Samaritan?" Victoria scoffed. "A good Samaritan who can turn invisible and throw people across rooms with his mind? I think not." Kyle sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Fair enough. The truth is, I'm hunting the organization responsible for your kidnapping. They're called the Dark Constellation, and they've been a thorn in my family's side for generations." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Your family? Who exactly are you, Kyle?" Before he could answer, the ship's alarms blared to life. Kyle spun towards the control panel, his fingers flying over the holographic display. "We've got company," he growled. "Pirate vessels closing fast." Victoria tensed. "Can we outrun them?" Kyle shook his head. "Not in this nebula. We'll have to fight." The Starfire shuddered as energy blasts peppered its shields. Kyle's hands danced across the controls, weaving the ship through the debris field of a shattered planet. 2 sleek pirate ships gave chase, their weapons blazing. "Hold on," Kyle warned, gritting his teeth. He pushed the Starfire into a steep dive, plunging towards the molten core of the dead world. The pirates followed, their shots going wide as Kyle expertly dodged and weaved. At the last possible second, Kyle pulled up, skimming the surface of the magma sea. One of the pirate ships wasn't so lucky. It clipped a tower of solidified rock, spinning out of control before exploding in a brilliant fireball. The remaining ship, however, stayed on their tail. Its captain's voice crackled over the comms, guttural and menacing. "Surrender the Zanari princess, and we might let you live." Kyle's eyes hardened. "Not a chance," he snarled, cutting the transmission. He spun in his chair, facing Victoria. "I need you to trust me," he said, his voice intense. "Can you do that?" Victoria hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Kyle closed his eyes, reaching out with his mind. The air around him began to shimmer with an otherworldly energy. Victoria gasped as the Starfire seemed to fade from existence, becoming translucent and ghostly. The pirate ship's sensors went haywire, unable to lock onto their now intangible target. Kyle pushed the Starfire to its limits, phasing through asteroid fields and stellar debris that would have shredded a normal ship. When they finally emerged from the nebula, Kyle released his hold on the ship's molecules. The strain of maintaining such a large-scale manipulation left him pale and shaky. Victoria stared at him in awe. How did you do that?" Kyle managed a weak smile. "It's a family trait. We call it the star flame." As he spoke, a memory surfaced unbidden. 10-year-old Kyle stood in a stark white room, his small frame trembling with exhaustion. His instructor, a severe woman with eyes like chips of ice, circled him slowly. "Your mind must be sharper than your strength, Kyle," she intoned. "Resist me." A searing pain lanced through Kyle's skull as the woman launched a telepathic assault. He cried out but forced himself to focus, pushing back with all his might. The woman's eyes widened in surprise before she staggered back, a trickle of blood running from her nose. Kyle collapsed, his vision swimming. The memory faded as the Starfire's comms panel chimed. Kyle shook himself, focusing on the present. A familiar face appeared on the screen. Captain Drake, leader of the Starship Vanguard and a trusted ally. "Kyle," Drake said, his voice relieved. "We've been trying to reach you for hours. Are you all right?" Kyle nodded. "We're fine, Captain. Just had a run-in with some pirates. We're heading to the rendezvous point now." Drake's eyes shifted to Victoria, and his expression softened. "Your Highness, it's good to see you safe. We'll be waiting for you." As the transmission ended, Kyle turned to Victoria, his expression serious. "We're not out of the woods yet, but we'll get you home." Victoria's gaze held a mixture of gratitude and determination. "Thank you, Kyle, for everything." Kyle nodded, turning back to the controls. As the Starfire streaked through the void, Kyle couldn't shake the feeling that his past was catching up with him. The dark constellation was still out there, and his destiny was calling. But for now, he had a princess to protect and a galaxy to save. The rest would have to wait. The days that followed were a blur of evasive maneuvers, narrow escapes, and intense planning. Kyle and Victoria formed an unlikely alliance, their bond forged in the crucible of constant danger. Victoria proved to be more than just a damsel in distress. Her quick thinking and diplomatic skills often got them out of tight spots that brute force alone couldn't solve. One evening, as they floated in the relative safety of a distant asteroid belt, Victoria approached Kyle, her expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking," she began, "about the dark constellation. If they want me so badly, it must be for more than just ransom. There has to be a reason." Kyle nodded, setting down the toolkit he'd been using to repair a damaged circuit. "You're right. The constellation usually has a bigger agenda. Have you noticed anything unusual about your captors? Anything they might have said or done?" Victoria furrowed her brow, thinking hard. "There was one thing," she said slowly. "I overheard a conversation about a place called the Void's Heart. They mentioned it as if it were incredibly important, but I couldn't gather more before they noticed me listening." Kyle's eyes widened. "The Void's Heart? That's a legend among bounty hunters and treasure seekers. It's said to be an ancient power source, something that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. If the dark constellation is after it, we're in more trouble than I thought." Victoria's expression turned serious. "Then we need to find it first. Whatever it is, we can't let it fall into their hands." Kyle agreed, feeling a sense of determination welling up within him. The stakes were higher than ever, and the path ahead was fraught with peril. But they had each other, and for now, that was enough. Their journey took them to the farthest reaches of known space, to forgotten worlds and hidden star systems. They encountered strange phenomena, ancient relics, and allies who joined their cause. Each step brought them closer to uncovering the mystery of the Void's Heart. On the barren, windswept planet of Eos 5, they found the first real clue. Deep within a hidden temple, they discovered an ancient star map etched into the walls, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. Kyle traced the lines with his fingers, feeling a strange resonance in his bones. "This is it," he murmured, his voice filled with awe. "This map leads to the Void's Heart." Victoria stood beside him, her eyes wide with wonder. "Then we must follow it." The map led them through a series of treacherous star systems, each more dangerous than the last. They faced hostile environments, deadly creatures, and the ever-present threat of the dark constellation. But with each challenge, their resolve grew stronger. Finally, they arrived at the coordinates marked on the map. They found themselves orbiting a planet that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Its surface shimmered with a strange energy, and the space around it was warped and distorted. "This must be the place," Kyle said, his voice filled with a mix of excitement and trepidation. As they descended to the planet's surface, they were met with a sight that took their breath away. The void's heart was not a singular object, but a massive, ancient structure, pulsating with raw energy. It looked like a cathedral of light and shadow, its spires reaching into the sky, its walls covered in intricate runes and symbols. "We have to get inside," Victoria said, her eyes shining with determination. They made their way into the heart of the structure, navigating its labyrinthine corridors and avoiding the traps and guardians that protected it. At the center, they found a chamber that radiated power. In its center floated a crystalline heart, pulsating with a rhythm that seemed to sync with their own heartbeats. "This is it," Kyle whispered. "The void's heart." But before they could approach it, the air shimmered and a figure materialized before them. It was a tall, imposing man, his eyes glowing with an eerie light. "You've done well to make it this far," he said, his voice cold and resonant. "But this is where your journey ends." Kyle recognized him instantly. "Solus," he spat, "leader of the Dark Constellation." Solus smiled, a cruel, mocking expression. "The void's heart belongs to us. With it, we will control the galaxy." "Not if we stop you," Victoria said, stepping forward, her eyes blazing with defiance. Solus laughed, a sound that echoed through the chamber. "You think you can stop me? You have no idea what you're dealing with." Kyle and Victoria exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. They had come too far, faced too many dangers, to turn back now. This was their moment. The battle that followed was unlike anything they had ever experienced. Solus wielded the power of the void's heart with terrifying precision, bending reality to his will. But Kyle and Victoria fought with a fierce determination, drawing on their own inner strength and the bond they had forged. As the battle reached its climax, Kyle saw an opportunity. He reached out with his mind, tapping into the same power that had allowed him to phase the starfire through solid matter. He felt the energy of the void's heart resonating with his own, a connection that defied explanation. With a final, desperate push, he directed that energy towards Solus. The leader of the Dark Constellation screamed as the power of the void's heart surged through him, overwhelming his defenses and shattering his control. Solus collapsed, his body disintegrating into a cloud of shimmering particles. The chamber fell silent, the pulsating heart at its center glowing with a serene, steady light. "We did it," Victoria said, her voice filled with awe and relief. Kyle nodded, feeling a sense of accomplishment and exhaustion wash over him. "We did." As they stood before the void's heart, they knew their journey was far from over. The galaxy was still full of dangers and mysteries, and their fight against the Dark Constellation was not yet finished. But for now, they had achieved something incredible. Together, they would face whatever came next, their bond stronger than ever. And as they looked into the heart of the ancient structure, they felt a new sense of hope and purpose. The galaxy was vast and full of challenges, but they were ready to face them, side by side.